It is now my pleasure to welcome to the podium our convocation speaker, Dr. Chris Pernell. Dr. Pernell serves as Chief Strategic Integration and Health Equity Officer at University Hospital. She focuses on health justice, community-based advocacy, health promotion, and disease prevention. At University Hospital, she oversees a portfolio that includes population health, strategic planning, community affairs, and human experience. Prior to joining University Hospital, she led the Workplace and Community Health Program at the 1199 SEIU League Labor Management Initiatives, focusing on workplace health strategies, worker empowerment, health equity, and health system transformation. New Jersey Biz has named her a public health hero, named her that in 2020. Also, she received the Ronald Davies Special Recognition Award from the American College of Preventive Medicine. Dr. Pernell serves as a frequent contributor across television, radio, and print media. We are delighted that she will address the class today. Dr. Pernell, please come to the podium.
Life, including its struggles, failures, disappointments, or even setbacks, should not be viewed through the lens of failure, but through the lens of opportunity. Good morning. I am immensely honored and humbled to be before you today. To all of the distinguished guests, distinguished family members, yes, you are distinguished. To all of my distinguished peers in senior administration and faculty, to the dean and the executive vice dean, but first and foremost to you. To the graduating class of Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in the year of 2022, I thank you for this opportunity to share with you. Today, I want to be a clarion call to your future. I recall sitting in a conference in New York where a healthcare futurist, or so he called himself, Ian Morrison, he prognosticated and even prophesied, if you will, what he believed then in December 2016 to be the future of healthcare. His assignment that day was to spur innovation, curiosity, and the tenacious strategies to solve for the future. I'm here to impress upon you one singular understanding as I celebrate you. What the future needs is people with the dogged resolve to challenge, reform, improve, and redefine the system today. The system is here, and foremost, the system of care that we talk about. But ultimately, it is the system or the ecosystems that structure our world, our society, our communities, our social and cultural spaces. But all of those systems are chock full of determinants, and they shape our ability to be whole, healthy, and healed and well. There is no health equity without the collective. There is no health justice without the grit, determination, and courage of doers. A band of disruptors, if you will. People across the human experience, and you'll hear me use this term multiple times today, and I will define it, across the various roles and places, and yes, among them, dare I say, are doctors and physicians. I'm asking you to be the physician of the future today. Because the only way that the system of the future will be built is if we break it and then build it ourselves. Every time I speak, and I do a lot of public speaking. Look, I am first and foremost a preacher. I don't know if you all invited a preacher, okay? I am the granddaughter of preachers, bishops, pastors, evangelists. But I do a lot of speaking, and every time when I speak, I stop and I pray and I say, Yahweh, tell me what it is that I should say to this particular audience at this particular moment in time, so that time transforms and becomes what we need it to be. Health equity and health justice are closely intertwined with racial justice, people justice, if you will, which we cannot achieve without tackling, dismantling, and destroying the systems of oppression and asymmetries of power like the system of racism. If this pandemic has taught us anything, is that we cannot afford to be politic, we cannot afford to be polite, we cannot afford to wait. Because people are dying and other people are not thriving. And you have been called, dare I say, to be a healer. Dr. Cameron Jones, who is a pantheon to those of us in public health, I am a preventive medicine and public health physician. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. Growing up in East Orange, I got another East Orange native here on the podium with me today, the brilliant Dr. Fitzhugh. But growing up in East Orange, I thought I would be the next Ben Carson. I'm not. I'm the first Dr. Chris Pernell. But literally, I did, since the 6th grade, I thought I would be the next Ben Carson. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. But Dr. Cameron Jones, in the field of public health, says that racism is a system of structuring opportunity, whereby one group, based on their skin color or phenotype or the social construct and the interpretation of race, is privileged and advantaged, whereby another group, based on their skin color, their phenotype, and the social construct interpretation of race, is disadvantaged. But the strength of the entire society is sapped. I think we have a disturbance. Again, I'm going to resume, but my thoughts and my prayers to the person who has been impacted and the guests who may be with them. But this is the urgency of what we are talking about. This is the urgency of now. And as I was describing what a system of racism is around structuring opportunity, the last thing that I was saying is that the strength of the whole is sapped when any part of the whole does not have the fullness of access or opportunity or the pursuit of life. And it's so very important that we as physicians understand that. And I was having this conversation just the other day with my brother, Bishop Pernell. I told you I'm surrounded by a family of faith. And he said something that stuck with me. And I was always a very well-behaved child. I did what my parents told me. I did what my teachers told me. But I also am the youngest of parents who grew up in the Jim Crow South and a father who waged the battle for civil rights and civil rights struggle. So I also know something about good trouble. So when my brother was speaking with me, the bishop, and he said, the system is a machine that works by itself. It doesn't make a difference whether a good man or a good woman is in charge. You see, his young daughter in a school in Newark had been called, and I'm going to say the word, a nigger by another student, and then that student proceeded to call him the same thing, and the administrators at first, they weren't doing anything. They weren't doing anything to fix the issue. And so as we were talking about this and more people got involved, people kept saying, but the leader is such a good man. You likely are very good people. But if we don't understand what the system is, the system of care, the ecosystems in the world around us, and we don't properly diagnose what is needed to change and transform those systems, then we only maintain and protect the status quo. We only maintain and protect the caste that exists in our society and world. And if we don't disrupt the system, if we don't break the system, if we don't treat the system sickness that we see, then those upstream conditions, what you've heard about, social determinants of health, political determinants of health, structural determinants of health, non-medical determinants of health, those factors will continue to segregate and distribute resources in such a way that you have haves and have-nots, the privileged and the unprivileged, the marginalized and those in power. But if you, good men and women, good people, see yourself as breaking the system, the parts of it that have only protected the status quo, then we really can begin to heal. You say, what is she talking about? I'm talking about the core, fundamental human aspects of who you are in order to be able to treat, dare I say, to see your patients, the people. Empathy, knowing the difference between intent and impact, thinking through a population health mental model, and understanding that being non-racist or non-sexist or non-homophobic or non-transphobic or non-anything is not enough. We must be anti-racist, anti-systems of oppression and othering that snuffs out lives, that destroys futures, or as we describe it through a pathological and disease state of lens, we must be anti-morbidity and mortality. I dare say never lose sight of the human experience, of the patients, their families, the communities, the workers. We all have names, we all have identities, intersectional identities. We all have stories and experiences that make us who we are, that matter. They matter for physicians because these stories, identities, and experiences shape and influence health and well-being. If this pandemic has taught you anything, it has taught you that. They matter for humanity because it is the stuff of our dignity and how we learn to walk in and show respect. So never forget your story. Never forget your identity. And in those moments in your training and your living when you are challenged or even dismayed, intentionally reflect on how you endured, how you overcame and survived and even thrived to get where you are today. Never forget, cry if you must. I've had plenty of bathroom stall moments. A little black girl from East Orange daring to believe that she could be a neurosurgeon and people constantly asking me, but why you, how you? Never forget, even if you grow frustrated, never forget. My own story. I told you I thought I'd be a neurosurgeon. Since the 6th grade, I remember when I got my acceptance letter at Princeton, I met my advisor, I sat her down, I said, look, these are the classes I need to take across these next 4 years so I can become a neurosurgeon in the next Ben Carson. And she said, Chris, welcome to Princeton. It's okay. If you have a little fun. I said, yeah, but I have to do this because I knew the importance of having parents who had not gone to college. And I knew the importance of parents who grew up in the Jim Crow South. I knew the importance of my grandparents who could not vote at one time. who were called boy and girl. I knew those stories of the color line. I lived with them. But even in my own sense of stick-to-itiveness, I encountered failure. I encountered disappointment. I encountered setbacks. I did not match in neurosurgery. Duke couldn't believe it. Duke called Johns Hopkins and said, what happened? Johns Hopkins spoke to the people at Mass General and said, what happened? How did Chris not match? It was in that disappointment that I had to find the fiery resolve to endure, to go west, to go out to UCLA. They all said it was a fluke. Take a pre-residency spot at Hopkins or reapply. And I got good advice. Don't take the pre-residency slot. Go out west. What I did not know is that when I went out west, I would have an epiphany. And I would understand that I wanted to doctor and heal communities in ways different than a neurosurgeon. I believe the things that happened to me were a part of my path of becoming. And I share that to you, yes, and I share that with you because everybody doesn't talk about their failures or their disappointments or their setbacks. Look, I stayed up later than anybody else. I volunteered for more cases. I had all the right answers. I was trying to flip chairs of departments at Duke University School of Medicine, and I did not match. I graduated with an honors thesis, and I did not match. But it was there in that neuropathology conference on the wall with my pager going off at UCLA Hospital that I got giddy, that I heard a voice that says, you don't want to be a neurosurgeon. And I said, what? How could I not want to be a neurosurgeon? I'm fight the power Chris. I'm fight the status quo Chris. I've told everybody, you don't want to be that. Give yourselves permission to be the you that the world needs. And I began to reflect on my father, a grass cutter at Bell Labs in Murray Hill, that has come up with so many advances that we now take for granted. I remember at my 8th grade graduation, my father, Clyde Bethia, saying to me, oh, you want to do neurosurgery? Someday you will use a laser. You won't even have to use a scalpel because they had all of this technology. They did the math for Easy Pass. My father was a part of the teams that did call waiting, caller ID, three-way call, and this man never went to college. He started cutting grass at Bell Labs, but became a member of senior technical staff. Those are the stories I want you to remember, because as you remember those stories, when adversity comes or when adversity is presented in the lives of your patients, you will be able to have empathy, and I dare say it is the greatest skill to have. It took me a while to figure out who I would become in medicine. I graduated in 2003, and it took me a while to figure out who I would become in medicine, but I had to keep close to my heart the core skills that as a human being I knew I possessed. I got very sick. I have postural orthostatic tachycardia. The fact that I stand here and I'm not the one passing out is my own miracle. I got so sick when I was at UCLA, I could not drive. They told me over and over again, Chris, you're going to have to leave training. I was like, no, I'm going to stay in training. Until my cardiologist said, if I get paged from you passing out at another place in this hospital and hitting your head and becoming a liability, I'm going to pull you out. But that's the same cardiologist who did not believe me at first. That I had to take, I heard that, yes, I had to take a journal article into my doctor's appointment. The same doctors who said, oh, it's all in her head, as my heart was racing from a seated to a standing position to 160 beats. Those are the things I can't forget because they allow me to connect with my patients, with communities, with people who are othered. And I dare say, you have a story. And if you never forget your own story, you can never neglect, devalue the stories or ignore the stories of other souls. And I say people our souls, because I told you I'm a preacher. I will never forget my father or my mother who had a PhD in love and showed me how to love people who don't look like me, who don't love like me, who don't believe like me. I mean, her kitchen. People could tell my mother things that if I told her, I was like, how is that so? I will never forget my grandparents. And I will leave you with a story of my maternal grandparents, because it is my Newark story. Because all of you will go to various places throughout this nation. Some of you, thankfully, will stay here and will train here. And I'll see you at University Hospital, the blessed hospital, where I have the privilege of working for the people every day. But my father, my grandfather, Reverend Harrison Gregory, and my grandmother, Inez Boswell Gregory, came to New Jersey from Virginia in the 1930s to stay with my grandfather's brother's son. They lived on 219 13th Avenue. My twin aunts, who are now 84, I no longer have my parents. I lost my father in this pandemic. That's why I'm known nationally, because I just kept speaking. Some people wanted me to be quiet. But I already told you who raised me. How could I be quiet and turn my back on a father like that? My twin aunts were born at the predecessor to the predecessor hospital of University. They were preemies in 1937, and they survived. And they became a part of my fabric of the Newark story, that indomitable spirit. And I dare say, if you train here, you have part of that indomitable spirit. Don't forget it. I don't forget it. I don't forget it as my mother tells me the stories of coming up north to be with her big sister, because the family went back and forth from Virginia to New Jersey. My mother finally coming back around 1958. And coming up north and witnessing the 1967 Newark uprising and seeing the rebellion just right with her very eyes, she would describe it. And she's like, I'd never seen anything like that before, but I understood the strife that had produced it. Never forget. Because these communities across these United States are continuing to be shaped like stories such as those, and they evidence themselves in morbidity and mortality in your treating room. You have a duty to learn, to remember. You have a duty to disrupt, to better, to improve, and transform the system of care and the systems that shape that system. If you can remember the power of your own stories and recognize the power of everyone's story, then human dignity and human lives begin to more than matter. They become of the utmost value. Some of you will lead in traditional ways. You will seize the opportunities that are presented. For those of you whom opportunity does not knock, or it knocks very timidly. For those of you, though you are an MD, still find yourself disempowered and disenfranchised, like I found myself carrying a journal article for other physicians to believe what was happening in my own body. To those of you who are among what we call those historically excluded groups, Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Native and Indigenous populations, the challenges and the barriers that provoke you, they will prompt you to lead. But everyone can lead, because there is situational power. But with power comes responsibility and accountability. You must share power. You must share power. As physicians, you share power with your patients through shared decision-making and believing and seeing and validating their stories and their truth. You must share power with the communities in which you have the honor and the privilege to train. You must share power among your colleagues and peers, because we must build diverse, equitable, and inclusive pipelines. But to share power, we must recognize our privilege and our biases and use that privilege to break the system and to demand change and to disengage and disarm our biases, to enable, to enliven, and enact justice. So I salute you today. I celebrate you today, and I dare you never to forget. I dare you to remember the story of my father who left his life in this pandemic. I dare you to remember the hopes and the dreams of my grandparents that sent them to Newark. I dare you to remember your immigrant stories, your refugee stories, your stories of discipline, your stories of tenacity, your stories of perseverance. I dare you to empathize, to be human, to always remember we are all a part of the human family. And then, and only then, can justice roll down like mighty waters. I thank you. I am in awe of you. I am counting on you. And I promise to lead alongside you. Thank you.
Dr. Pernell, please come. We want to present you with this token of our appreciation for being our convocation speaker for 2022. And I have to tell you a little story about this award. Typically, the dean invites a speaker, and we've had convocations here every year since I've been dean, and then we present the dean with this award. Early in my time as dean, I invited Ben Carson. And now you and Ben Carson, you don't want to take it? And I have to tell you, he didn't get a standing ovation.